Hi everyone, welcome back to Make Your Daughter a Dress. I just got in from shoveling and there's more snow expected for Monday night, but here in the sewing studio we are going to thank spring. So today is the first of 3 bonus lessons, all of which are going to show you different options for embellishing the neckline on the July Flowers dress. And I'm going to run them this week now, so while you're gathering your materials, so you'll you can decide which, if any of these options you want to incorporate in your dress, and you'll be set to go once we start sewing. All of these will use that fat quarter, or if you couldn't get a fat quarter, a half a yard of fabric that is your contrasting fabric. So we're going to start today with just a simple ruffle that you could put around the neckline, and it will work with regardless of whether you're making the boat neck version or the scoop neck version. So let's get started. Okay, so a ruffle is just made from a simple strip of fabric, but we need to figure out how long and wide we need that strip to be, and then we're going to cut that strip on the bias. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry, I'm going to walk you through it. So first up, we're going to figure out the length we need for our strip. So I have my bodice front and my bodice back, and I'm just going to take my tape measure and I'm going to just measure up and around on that bodice front. And that's coming in, we'll say 4.5 inches. So I'm going to double that because this is only half of my bodice. So we're going to say 9 inches for my bodice front. And then for my bodice back, I'm going to measure from that center back mark. This is the center back, and you'll see there's a notch right there. That's what we call those. So I'm going to measure from that notch up to the top, and that's coming in at 4 inches. And we have 2 of those, so we're going to say a total of 8 inches. So altogether, I have 17 inches. Now you notice I haven't been real precise. There's a lot of times in sewing you need to be real precise, but figuring out the length of the ruffle is not one of them. So I have a total of 17 inches, adding both my front and backs together. But I'm going to lose 2 inches in the shoulder seams, so I'm going to subtract that, and that's going to give me a total of 15 inches. Now ruffle is just gathered fabric, so I'm going to double that. So my length of my ruffle that I need is going to be 30 inches, that 15 inches doubled. If you didn't follow me on that, just put a question down in the comments and I will walk you through it. So that is going to be the length of my strip. Now my width can be however wide you think would look good. So here's my little July Flowers dress. You could look at a ruffle on your daughter's clothes to get an idea. You could look at a ruffle on a piece of your own clothing to get an idea. This little weak hair gown that I made, I put a ruffle on the bottom, and this is just about a 1/2 inch. And I think, you could do that, but I think that would be a little small. I kind of think that I would like it to come down to about here. And so I'm going to go for a finished 1.5 inch ruffle. Again, you could make yours smaller or you could make it bigger. It's totally, you're the designer. So to do a 1.5 inch width ruffle, I have to double that because we're going to fold on this strip in half, and I'll show you that in a minute. So that's going to be 3 inches. And then again, I have to allow for my seam allowances, which are going to get caught up here, and that requires another inch because we have a 1/2 inch seam allowance there. So that means I'm going to cut my strip 4 inches wide and 30 inches long. Okay, so let me show you how we're going to do that. here's my contrasting fabric that I'm using. This is a fat quarter. And we want to cut this on the bias. The bias is going to let that ruffle curve nicely around and not stick up straight at some strange angle. So we need to use the bias. And the way we do that is the bias is that true 45-degree angle. So you just take your piece of fabric and you're just going to fold it up to meet the other edge. And there you get your 45. Now, it doesn't matter. The bias is the bias. I could do it this way. You could do it the other way. You need to have, just make sure that you have a straight edge and a straight edge, and you're bringing your straight edges together. Okay, so there's my nice 45-degree angle. And I'm going to cut this with my rotary cutter and my ruler. Now, if you don't have this, you can absolutely do it with your scissors, or your shears. I should call them shears. Just get your marking pen, one of your ones you're disappearing or the blue one, either one, and a regular ruler, and just draw it right on the fabric and then use the shears to cut it out. Okay, I'm doing this just because it's easier. Okay, now I'm cutting it at 2 inches because I have it folded in half. So this one is going to be move it on up and make sure I don't cut my table by going off. Okay, and there we go. All right, and there's my 4-inch bias. Now I'm going to cut it square. And you're probably noticing right now that, so I'm going to leave that one, that this is not the 30 inches I need. No, it isn't. But I'll show you how to handle that in just a minute. So there's one strip. And let's see how long this is. Much more I need. So this is coming in at 22. So I need another 8 inches. We'll just take one here, and of course this time it's not folded in half, so I need to get that whole 4 inches. Okay. And we're just going to then seam these together. Now, in order to seam these together, I'm just going to put right sides together, and I'm going to sew these on the machine in a minute. As you can see, my one strip is longer than the other, and that's actually good. If you cut strips that were both the same length, and that is fine if you do that, then take one of those strips, cut it in half, and sew on both ends. What you want to avoid is putting the seam right at center front, right here on this little jumper. You're going to notice the seam if it's there. As long as it's off to one side, either way, you won't see it. So just make sure you don't take two equal length strips and seam them right down the middle. So I've threaded up my machine with matching thread, and I've put right sides together, and I'm just gonna sew the two short edges together. I'm using the standard straight stitch, standard length, and I'm just gonna stitch. This is actually with a 1/3 seam allowance. You can use a 1/4 to a 1/3. Okay, so I'm gonna go the bottom, and then just back stitch and go forward to lock your stitches. Simple as that. Now, whenever we sew a seam, you always need to iron it. So you're going to always iron it flat the way it was sewn to set the stitches, and then we're going to open it up, finger press it, and then iron it flat, and that'll give you a nice finish. Now while I'm here, I'm just going to turn in each of my edges, my other short edges. I'm just doing that by 1/4 of an inch. So now I'm going to sew both of those short ends down. I'm using my 1/4 inch foot. You can also use it at edge foot if you have it, or if you don't, just use your regular foot. The 1/4 inch just gives me a nice guide, and I'm just sewing those down to finish those short edges. And again, back stitching at both the beginning and the ends. Okay, folded my strip in half with wrong sides together. You can see the seams, hopefully you can see that, are on the inside there. And I've pinned it so those seams line up. I hope you can see that the pin actually is right in that seam allowance and in the seam allowance, so it's all lined up. I've pinned this end and the other end. And I'm now going to sew right along this long raw edge, sewing the strip together, but I'm going to change the length of my stitch to a long gathering thread, which just means I'm going to make that length as long as it can go. So I've set my stitch length at 5. You can see that pin is still in there, just because I'm going to put the needle down and then I'm going to pull it out so I don't stitch over it. I'm not going to back stitch this time. I'm just going to sew straight across, and I'm sewing at a 1/4 inch. Okay, now I'm going to sew a second line of gathering thread, basting stitches with that, again, that long stitch length of 5, and this time I'm going to do it at 5/8 of a seam allowance. Okay, before I start to gather this up, I've marked the middle of my ruffle, because that's what's going to have to go center front here on the front of my bodice. And when I stitched this, I actually switched to white thread in my bobbin just so you could see it a little bit easier. So you want to make sure you grab the 2 bobbin threads, not the top thread, And you're just going to start pulling them and moving it along to gather up your ruffle. And yes, this does take a little bit of effort and a few minutes. It's a great thing to do in front of the television or while you're listening to a podcast, if you're trying to do lots of ruffles. You want to do this from both ends towards the middle. It just makes it easier not to try to go all the way to the other end. And then I'm going to flip over and do it on the other side. I ran out of the top thread right there. It broke. But I got to the end. You might find that it doesn't really glide past wherever your seam allowance, wherever you seamed it, and I am having that happen here. So I'm just gonna do more gathering from this end to move it along. And you can see, okay, as you can see, I'm getting a nice ruffle. And then there's my center front, and so it's going to go right like that and around to the back. Okay. Now, I'm not going to have you attach it right now. We will do that after we sew our shoulders and our bodice together, which is the next main lesson. But this would be how you would make a simple ruffle if you would like to put that embellishment on the neckline of your dress. And just remember that you'll lose, about a 1/2 inch of this, so it'll be about that into the seam allowance, that width when it's done. Okay. And there's sort of our finished ruffle. So there's no homework for this lesson because I want you to see the other 2 bonus videos before you decide if you're going to put any kind of trim at the top of your neckline. So all you need to do is to continue gathering your supplies and sort of making up your mind as far as trims and embellishments go. And after the next main lesson, which I believe is lesson 4, you'll need to be ready to decide what trim, if any, you want to put on your neckline. And at that point, I will show you how to apply the trim, depending on which one you're choosing. So have a good day and happy sewing.